So let's get right into it. We're going to break down this really influential paper that asks a critical question we should all be thinking about. When it comes to AI, can it actually get too big? This is all about the arguments from On the Dangers of Stochastic Parrots.
I mean, you've seen it, right? These large language models, or LLMs, are just everywhere. And honestly, the stuff they can do is mind-blowing. They can generate text that feels so human, and they just keep getting better and better with every new version.
Now, to really get the main argument of this paper, you have to meet this guy, the stochastic parrot. This is the central metaphor for this whole thing. It seems like a simple image, but trust me, it packs a huge punch and really gets to the heart of what these AI models might actually be doing.
And that leads us to the big thorny question. What if all that fluency we're seeing, the poetry, the complex essays, what if it isn't real understanding? What if it's actually something else? Something that's hiding some pretty serious risks we're not really paying attention to.
So how did we even get here? Well, it all kicked off with this huge trend in the AI world, a flat-out race to build the biggest, most massive models possible. The thinking was pretty straightforward. The bigger the data, the more parameters, the better the AI.
Just look at these numbers. The scale of this explosion it's just wild. In 2019, BERT Large was considered this massive thing with 340 million parameters. Then, just 1 year later, GPT-3 comes out with 175 times billion. And then, just a year after that, Switch Siege hits 1.6 trillion. I mean, this isn't just growth, it's a completely different reality in just 2 years.
But, that kind of explosive growth doesn't come for free. It comes at a really steep price, one that we don't talk about nearly enough. So let's get into the first big risk the paper points out, the hidden costs, both for the planet and our wallets.
284 tons of CO2. Let that sink in for a second. That's the carbon footprint for training just one large model. To give you some perspective, the average person is responsible for about 5 tons in an entire year.
And if that number still feels a bit abstract, this comparison really brings it home. Just training one of these models takes about the same amount of energy as a plane flying all the way across the United States. Suddenly, that abstract cost feels very, very real.
This quote from the paper is so powerful because it gets to the human side of that cost. The consequences of climate change, as we know, hit marginalized communities the hardest, places like the Maldives, which could literally be underwater soon. So the people paying the ultimate environmental price are almost never the ones who get to benefit from the technology.
All right, so we've got the environmental cost, but the problems don't stop there. We have to talk about what these models are actually learning from, because the data itself, it's a total minefield.
Here's the thing you have to understand. Just scraping the entire web doesn't give you a fair picture of humanity. Not even close. It gives you a really skewed one. It's dominated by younger people from developed countries and by heavily male sites like Reddit. And get this, even when people try to filter out bad words, they can end up accidentally erasing the way marginalized groups talk. The end result is that the training data just amplifies the loudest and often the most harmful voices in the room.
This idea cited in the paper just nails it. It's this fantasy, right? That we can just pour all of humanity's garbage, all the bias, the ugliness, the cruelty, into a machine and then act shocked when it reflects that garbage right back at us. That's not just being optimistic, it's completely unrealistic.
And this all leads us to the absolute heart of the paper, its most controversial and fascinating argument. When you see an AI write something that's perfectly fluent and makes sense, is it actually understanding what it's saying? Or is it just an incredibly sophisticated mimic?
And that's where we get the name for this whole idea. Here's the official definition. A stochastic parrot is basically a system that's just stitching together words based on probability, on what it's seen before in its gigantic data set. And the most important part of that definition is this: without any reference to meaning. It's all pattern matching. There's no real comprehension there.
So if it's just mimicking, why is it so convincing? Well, the simple answer is, we are. Our brains are literally hardwired to look for meaning and intention in language. So when we read a sentence that sounds right, we just automatically assume there's a thinking mind behind it. We're the ones projecting meaning onto the parrot's words.
Look, this isn't just some fun academic debate. When these stochastic parrots are actually used out in the real world, their total lack of understanding, combined with all the biases they've soaked up, can cause very real, very serious harm.
And the potential for damage here is enormous. We're talking about models being used to amplify stereotypes and hate speech, to pump out misinformation and propaganda at a massive scale. They can be used to automate online harassment. And, as we're about to see, when they make mistakes in high-stakes situations, the consequences can be devastating.
And no, this is not a hypothetical. This is a real story from the paper. A man posted, "Good morning," on Facebook. A machine translation system, the kind of tech we're talking about, completely misinterpreted it as "attack them," and he was arrested. That is what happens when a system that only sees patterns, not meaning, gets it wrong in the real world. The stakes are life-changing. So, wow, after laying out all of these incredibly serious dangers, the paper doesn't just leave us there. It actually tries to chart a path forward, a way to build AI that's more thoughtful and, frankly, more responsible.
And they boil it down to these 4 key recommendations. First, think about the costs, the environmental ones, the financial ones, before you even start building. Second, stop just scraping the web and start putting real effort and money into carefully creating and documenting data sets. Third, actually talk to the people who are going to be affected by this tech. And finally, let's change what we value. Let's encourage research that isn't just about making models bigger, but making them smarter and more efficient.
Which leaves us with this final massive question to think about. The dream, right, has always been to create an AI that could be a true partner for humanity. But looking at the path we're on now, we have to stop and ask ourselves, is that what we're actually building? Or are we just getting better and better and making a more convincing and maybe even a more dangerous parrot?